Greetings, fellow guardians of forgotten tales. What if the universe conspired to test one man's soul with the fury of two suns, and he emerged, not broken, but unbreakable? That's no myth. It's the defiant reality of Tsutomu Yamaguchi, the only soul officially etched in Japan's records as surviving both atomic infernos of 1945. Today, we unravel his shocking, untold odyssey. From a routine business trip turned apocalypse to a lifetime crusading for peace amid personal shadows of loss and pain. Buckle up for a journey that challenges fate itself, revealing how one ordinary engineer's whisper became a global roar against nuclear madness. If stories of improbable resilience stir your spirit, hit that subscribe button now, ring the bell, and let's dive into the fire together. Picture a boy born under cherry blossoms in 1916 in the bustling port city of Nagasaki, where the sea whispered promises of adventure and the mountains stood sentinel against the horizon. Tsutomu Yamaguchi entered the world on March 16th, that fateful year, into a Japan awakening from isolation. Its samurai spirit reforged into industrial might. His father, a school teacher with a quiet fire for knowledge, instilled in young Tsutomu a reverence for precision and perseverance, lessons that would one day anchor him through hell's own gale. Growing up amid the clatter of shipyards and the hum of wartime drills, Tsutomu was no stranger to discipline. School days blurred into apprenticeships, his nimble hands sketching dreams of steel behemoths that could conquer oceans. By his early 20s, he'd married Hisako, a gentlewoman whose laughter was his harbor, and together they welcomed two children into a home that echoed with hopes of prosperity. But as the 1930s unfolded, those hopes darkened under the shadow of expansionist fervor. Japan's armies marching across Asia, factories churning out weapons of war, and whispers of American steel ships patrolling distant waters. Tsutomu, ever the pragmatist, joined Mitsubishi Heavy Industries in 1939, rising swiftly as a marine engineer, his mind a forge for oil tankers that fueled the empire's insatiable hunger. Little did he know, his expertise would soon propel him into the heart of history's cruelest irony. Weekends found him sketching blueprints by lantern light, sharing dreams with Hisako over rice and pickled plums, while their son Katsutoshi toddled at his feet, oblivious to the storm brewing across the Pacific. Yet, even then, Tsutomu felt the pull of duty, a quiet resolve to build, not destroy, in a nation hurtling toward cataclysm. As Pearl Harbor's echoes faded into ration cards and blackouts, he poured his soul into designs that kept Japan's fleet afloat, his heart anchored by family photos tucked into his drafting desk. It was a life of quiet ambition, threaded with the universal ache of a father fearing for his children's tomorrow. But tomorrow for Tsutomu was about to explode. Who among us hasn't chased a deadline across unfamiliar streets, only to stumble into destiny's jaws? For Tsutomu, that summer of 1945 was meant to be a triumphant, close to a grueling 3-month assignment in Hiroshima, far from Nagasaki's familiar embrace. At 29, with salt in his veins from years at Mitsubishi, he was wrapping up plans for a massive oil tanker, a vessel to bridge Japan's besieged shores with distant fuel lifelines. Hiroshima, that ancient city of shrines and rivers, had become a second skin, its humid mornings alive with the chatter of workers and the distant rumble of trains. On August 5th, he penned a letter home, promising Hisako he'd board the 7 a.m. express the next day, arms laden with souvenirs for the kids. Sleep came fitfully that night, haunted by the ceaseless drone of patrols overhead. B-29s, those silver ghosts of the enemy, too high for harm, or so they told themselves. Dawn broke clear and merciless on the 6th, the sky a vast indigo canvas streaked with the first blush of sun. Tsutomu rose early, his uniform crisp, briefcase swinging as he joined colleagues Akira Iwanaga and Kuniyoshi Sato for the short walk to the shipyard offices. The air hummed with routine, vendors hawking rice balls, schoolgirls in white blouses giggling past, the river Ote glittering like fool's gold. They chatted of home, of post-war barbecues, and baseball leagues reborn, their laughter a fragile shield against the war's grind. But at 8:15 a.m., as they neared the bridge, a shadow sliced the heavens. A lone B-29, unescorted, lazy in its arc. Tsutomu glanced up, squinting against the glare. "Just a scout," he muttered, but something primal stirred, a chill that had nothing to do with the breeze. Then, from the bomber's belly, a glint, a small object, tumbling earthward, trailing a parachute like a falling star mocking gravity. Time stretched thin as they watched, transfixed. What weapon deploys so delicately, they wondered, hearts quickening with unease. The answer came in a heartbeat, a flash, white-hot and absolute, brighter than 1,000 magnesium flares igniting the soul. The world inverted. Tsutomu felt the air thicken, then erupt, a pressure wave that lifted him like a leaf in a typhoon and hurled him into rubble-strewn earth. Eardrums shredded in the roar, skin seared by an invisible kill, eyes blinded by the aftermage of oblivion. He lay there, 1.8 kilometers from ground zero, gasping on dust and the metallic taste of blood, thinking, is this it, or just the gods' cruel jest? When vision clawed back, Hiroshima was a cauldron, flames licking skeletons of buildings, the river boiling with the dead and dying, screams weaving a tapestry of despair. Blistered and deafened, Tsutomu staggered upright, his colleagues nowhere in sight, the city he knew reduced to a charnel house under a mushroom crown, blotting the sun. In that moment, survival wasn't triumph. It was a question mark, etched in agony. Stumbling through the apocalypse, Tsutomu became a ghost in his own nightmare, navigating a labyrinth of charred flesh and toppled lives. The blast's thermal pulse had stripped flesh from bone within a mile, but at his distance, it was the radiation's sly venom that began its work, nausea twisting his gut, hair follicles igniting in silent protest. He sought refuge in a gutted concrete shelter, its walls weeping black soot, where shadows huddled like condemned souls. There, amid the moans of the maimed, he pieced together fragments. This was no conventional bomb, no cluster of firebombs like Tokyo's hellscape. Witnesses babbled of a single sun birthed from the sky, a device of Yankee sorcery that devoured cities whole. Tsutomu's mind reeled. How? Why us? But instinct overrode philosophy. He had a family waiting, a train to catch. By evening, bandaged crudely with scavenged cloth, his face a mask of welts and his left ear a throbbing void, he clawed his way to the station. The tracks, mercifully spared total ruin, bore witness to rivers of refugees, blinded mothers clutching phantom children, soldiers stripped to skeletons by the heat. Boarding that iron lifeline felt like tempting Yama, the death god, but Tsutomu clutched his briefcase like a talisman. Its blueprints now, ash dreams. The journey blurred into fevered haze, 13 torturous hours, each jolt reopening wounds, the air thick with the stench of unwashed terror. He arrived in Nagasaki past midnight on the 7th, a specter collapsing into Hisako's arms, her cry a dagger to his heart. "The Americans dropped a bomb like no other," he rasped, voice a gravel whisper, as she sponged his burns and fed him sips of broth. Their children, wide-eyed Katsutoshi and infant Naoko, peered from the tatami, innocence cracking under the weight of their father's gaze. For a night, home was sanctuary, soft futons, the scent of miso, simmering Hisoko's hand-tracing scars that mapped his survival. Swallowing pain like sake, he rose on the 8th, bandaged but unbowed, and reported to Mitsubishi's Nagasaki shipyard. But dawn demanded duty. Tsutomu, ever the engineer, couldn't let Hiroshima's echo fade unheard. His supervisor, a stern veteran named Dr. Yoshida, listened skeptically as Tsutomu recounted the flash, the wave, the city's erasure. Impossible. One bomb. The man scoffed, but ordered precautions, reinforce shelters, drill for special attacks. Tsutomu nodded, his warnings a seed in barren soil. Little knowing, the reaper circled once more. In those stolen hours of reprieve, he walked Nagasaki's hills with Hisako, stealing kisses amid camellia blooms, vowing silently, "I'll build us a world without such shadows." Yet fate, that capricious puppeteer, had one more act scripted in fire. How does one warn of Armageddon when the world dismisses it as delirium? Tsutomu Yamaguchi learned that bitter truth on August 9, 1945, a morning that dawned with deceptive serenity over Nagasaki's verdant valleys. The city, his cradle and fortress, sprawled like a dragon, coiled at the Urakami River's bend. Factories belching smoke, temples tolling bells for the living and lost. At Mitsubishi's offices, nestled in the industrial hum, 3 kilometers from the valley's heart, Tsutomu gathered with a dozen colleagues in a conference room thick with cigarette haze and blueprint scrolls. He was midway through his report, voice gaining strength as he sketched the Hiroshima horror on a chalkboard, a light that swallowed the sun, a wind that flayed the earth when heads turned skyward at the familiar growl. Another B-29, solitary and sinister, etched its path against the blue. "Not again," someone murmured, but Tsutomu froze, pulse hammering a dirge, déjà vu's cruel twin. At 11:02 a.m., the silver speck detached, parachuting toward Urakami-like judgment's verdict. The room held its breath. Tsutomu, scarred memory screaming, dove under the heavy oak table, bellowing down, "Cover." His Hiroshima reflex, saving lives in that instant. Then, the flash, familiar, ferocious, a second magnesium dawn, searing retinas and souls. The blast wave followed, a thunderclap that buckled walls and hurled bodies like chaff, the table groaning under debris as glass rained like shrapnel stars. Tsutomu curled up, arms over his head, as the deafening roar filled his good ear, heat burning against his fresh bandages. When the maelstrom ebbed, Nagasaki mirrored its sister, a vortex of flame and fallout. The valley, a smoldering crater where 40,000 souls vanished in vapor. Emerging from the wreckage, Tsutomu blinked through smoke, his body a fresh canvas of welts, arms scorched anew, lungs raw with ash, but alive, impossibly. Colleagues stirred nearby, one weeping, another silent. His warnings, once scoffed, now gospel. "You were right," Dr. Yoshida gasped, clutching a bloodied arm. "What devilry is this?" Staggering into the street, Tsutomu beheld the pandemonium. Trolleys mangled like toys, rivers choked with bloated forms, the air alive with the keening of the orphaned and burned. He wandered in days, aiding where he could, hoisting beams from trapped workers, sharing water from his canteen, his engineer's mind cataloging the impossible, buildings vaporized at the epicenter, shadows etched on walls where humans once stood. Radiation, sickness, crept insidious, a queasy tide that felled him twice en route home, but will propelled him to Hisako's side by dusk. She, spared the worst by distance, enveloped him in tears, their embrace a dam against the flood. That night, as Emperor Hirohito's voice crackled over the radio, announcing surrender on the 15th, Tsutomu held his family close, whispering, "We're the lucky ones." But luck, he would learn, carried thorns. The immediate aftermath was a forge of fortitude and fragility, where survival's gift twisted into endurance's curse. Hiroshima's scars reopened under Nagasaki's fresh assault. Tsutomu's skin sloughed in sheets, demanding salves of aloe and mercy. His hair, already thinning, fell in clumps, leaving him bald and bandaged like a leper from ancient scrolls. For weeks, he shuttled between makeshift clinics, where doctors, overwhelmed and underarmed, prescribed rest he couldn't afford. Mitsubishi, crippled but clinging, furloughed him with meager rice rations, forcing the family to forage amid ruins. Hisoko, ever the pillar, bartered heirlooms for medicine, her hands calloused from washing wounds that wept pus. Katsutoshi, now 4, asked innocent Barbs, "Papa, why do you smell like fire?" piercing deeper than any shrapnel. Naoko, the baby, fussed through nights, lit by distant pyres, the city reeking of cremated sorrow. Yet, in that crucible, Tsutomu found flickers of grace, neighbors sharing salted fishtails of resilience, children chalking hopscotch on cracked pavement. By September, as American occupiers arrived with Hershey bars and jeeps, he resumed light duties, translating manifests, his bilingual scraps from school, now lifelines. But the bomb's invisible legacy lurked. Leukemia's shadow danced in blood tests, cataracts clouded his draftsman's eye, chronic pain knotted his limbs like rusted chains. Officially, in 1957, Japan certified him a Hibakusha atomic victim for Nagasaki alone. Hiroshima's echo stayed buried, a secret too heavy for forms. He swallowed it, focusing on normalcy, promotions at Mitsubishi, coaching Katsutoshi's soccer dreams, Naoko's first kanji strokes under his guidance. Build forward, he'd tell his reflection, tracing scars that mapped to dooms. Family became fortress, Sunday picnics on Mount Inasa, where winds carried sea salt and second chances. Hisoko bore her own burdens silently, her exposures milder but mounting, their love a quiet pact against the void. Through the 1950s economic miracle, Tsutomu climbed to senior engineer, his tankers sailing global routes. But nights brought flashbacks, the flashes glare, the waves wail. He confided little, fearing pity's stain, until the 1960s protests stirred old embers. Still, he prioritized presence, Father's Day fishing trips, where Katsutoshi's laughter drowned the ghosts. By the 1970s, as children fled nests, Katsutoshi to university, Naoko to teaching, Tsutomu's body rebelled, recurring fevers, a limp from nerve damage. Yet, he pressed on, retiring in 1980 with honors and a pension thin as wartime yen. In quiet moments, sketching poetry amid camellias, he pondered, why me, to witness or to warn? The answer simmered, awaiting its hour. What happens when silence shatters like fragile porcelain, birthing a voice that echoes across oceans? For Tsutomu Yamaguchi, the 1980s marked that fracture. as age peeled back the stoicism of youth and revealed a prophet forged in dual fires. Retirement brought leisure for reflection. Long walks, Nagasaki's rebuilt streets, where steel skeletons rose from ash like phoenix bones. But health's toll mounted. Leukemia diagnosis in 1986, cataracts, blurring sunsets, stomach pains that twisted like barbed wire. Hisoko, his anchor, weakened to her liver, shadowed by radiation's grudge. Their son, Katsutoshi, thriving as a salaryman, married and fathered grandchildren, yet confided fears of inherited curses. Naoko, the teacher, poured love into classrooms, but her sickly frame, fevers, fatigue, mirrored her father's fight. Tsutomu watched, heart aching, as the Hibakusha community swelled with stories, cancers claiming comrades, governments dragging feet on aid. In 2005, the blow landed hardest. Katsutoshi, just 59, succumbed to lung cancer. His final breath, a plea. "Dad, tell them, make it mean something." Grief cracked the dam. Tsutomu, now 89, vowed aloud over the grave, no more hiding. He penned Ikasara Tiru Inochi, a life well lived, in 2006. Pages raw with flashbacks, the parachute's lazy descent, the blast's biblical howl, the moral quake of survival. Words flowed like unburdened rivers, blending engineering precision with poetic ache, selling modestly but piercing souls. That same year, director Fumio, Abe, cast him in twice, Survived, a documentary unveiling Ibai Liushiwu near Hibakusha, double survivors, like him, their tales a chorus of quiet miracles. Screened at the United Nations, Tsutomu's segment drew gasps. There, in Geneva's marbled halls, he stood frail but fierce, voice steady. "I call on the leaders of the world to choose peace. No one should know this hell." Applause thundered, but his eyes sought Hisoko's, absent now. She'd slipped away in 2008, kidney and liver ravaged. Her last words, a murmur of pride. Undeterred, Tsutomu pressed on, granting interviews to the BBC and New York Times, his English halting but heart fluent. "I could have died twice," he'd say, a wry smile cracking scars. "Everything after is bonus time." In 2009, at 93, he petitioned for dual recognition, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, etched official. Japan's government, moved by his tome and testimony, granted it March 24th, dubbing him the sole verified Nior Hibakusha. Honors followed. The Order of the Rising Sun, a medal heavy with irony, pinned to a chest that housed 2 atomic echoes. Even as stomach cancer gnawed, he spoke at schools, his grandchildren at his knee, reciting poetry of blooms from rubble. "Hate the bomb, not the bomber," he'd muse, challenging easy villains. His final months, hospitalized from November 2009, brimmed with visitors. James Cameron, plotting a film from his bedside, vowing to amplify the cry. Tsutomu nodded, eyes twinkling. "Pass it on, so they never forget." On January 4th, 2010, he departed at 93, not with a whimper, but a legacy that outlives empires. Yet Tsutomu's flame kindled others. The Tsutomu Yamaguchi Legacy of Hope Foundation, launched 2015, bridges cultures with peace scholarships, echoing his UN plea. Documentaries proliferate, books translate his verse, ensuring the double survivors saga endures. And so, Tsutomu Yamaguchi's tapestry weaves from ordinary thread a cloak of cosmic defiance. A man who danced with death's scythe twice and chose, in the end, to wield words as his sword. His story isn't just survival. It's illuminating nuclear war's banal prelude and biblical toll for From Mitsubishi's drafting tables to global disarmament halls, we learn resilience's double edge, the grit to rebuild amid radiation's whisper, the grace to forgive without forgetting. But questions linger, don't they? Was his Odyssey destiny's design, a living parable against hubris, or mere chance in chaos, urging us to banish such lotteries forever? Imagine if every policymaker felt that flash. What worlds might we spare? Ponder that, friends, and drop your thoughts below. Could you warn a world that won't listen? Share this if it stirred your soul. Subscribe for more unvarnished histories. And remember, history isn't past, it's our blueprint for tomorrow. Until next time, keep seeking the light in the shadows. Thank you.